Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello, my name is Jason Fanelli. I am a freelance game journalist mercenary of over 15 years. Recent bylines include GameSpot, MMORPG, recent reviews in Game Informer, sometimes do a guest spot on Game Mess Mornings with Jeff Grubb over at Giant Bomb, all sorts of places across those 15 years. I've also started a side gig on YouTube and TikTok called TCG John. Yes, John, Philadelphia, Go Birds, all that good stuff. Talking about trading card games, Magic, Pokemon, Lorcana, so on and so forth. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Here we're to talk about one of the most fascinating PC games I have ever played, a point-and-click adventure from the year 1996, and a game that is 100% an adventure out of time. Yes, today we are talking about Titanic, Adventure Out of Time, a 2-disc game at the time that released on Halloween 1996. By CyberFlix, a company that used a proprietary graphics engine to create, the visage of people moving their mouths and wide eyes, and actually like with not human movements, but certainly like using human actors in this sort of weird. It's really hard to explain, but it's a fascinating way that they made this work. The engine was called Dream Factory. It was also used to create Dust, Tale of the Wild West, which is the game before this. And there are some references to it sprinkled throughout the game. It's an adventure that takes place on a virtual, historically accurate representation of the Titanic, the ill-fated steamship from the early 1910s that sank in the Alaskan seas in 1912 after hitting an iceberg. The company, CyberFlix, the developer, took about 2 years strictly getting the historical accuracy correct, be it through blueprints or pictures or whatever they get their hands on to make this game to make this setting as accurate as possible. In fact, when you're not playing the actual game, there's a separate mode called Tour that just lets you walk around the ship with narration from the characters in the game, telling you about different parts of the ship and the sinking, giving you a bit of a historical background as well, which is kind of cool. So you wake up actually 30 years ahead in 1942. You play as a former British Secret Service agent named Frank Carlson. He failed a mission aboard the Titanic before its sinking and was dismissed from the Secret Service because of it. And you find this out through getting your point and click bearings. It actually serves as a nice little tutorial of how you can click on whatever you see. Some things can be investigated. Sometimes you click on a scene and it zooms in on like a table and there's different things to click on there. Basic point and click adventure type stuff. After you do a certain amount of things, a bomb hits your apartment building and you are thrust back 30 years back onto the Titanic on the night that it is set to sink. You're given a few items, like a bag to hold items that you'll be finding throughout the game, a pocket watch so you can see what time it is, which is a bit of a sleight of hand sort of like an interesting little detail that we'll get into later. It's not anything that really affects you in the very beginning. And then you go off on your mission. Your first thing to do is to go up to the gymnasium on the top deck of the Titanic. You meet with your contact, who is another agent named Penny Pringle, and the mission is on. You are then going to go throughout the entire ship looking for certain objects of importance. One is a stolen copy of Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat, an actual collection of Persian poems from the 1800s or maybe earlier. And then you're going to find a painting, which we'll get into. You're going to find a notebook of Russian spies. It is a very fascinating sort of historical fiction mission here. You'll be dealing with a German colonel who says he's inspecting embassies in America and South America, but not actually. He's doing other things, and this all sort of ties into the political situation at the time, where the ending, one of 8 different endings, mind you, kind of sets the world in a different way. And I'll get into that towards the end. But one of the first things that struck me about this game is how CyberFlix was able to create this eerie sensation throughout the ship. You know, as a person living in 2024, that the ship is going to sink. Like, you know what happens to the Titanic. It's the same reason, the same sort of dread that you felt when you watched James Cameron's classic film all those years ago. You know how it ends. You know what's going to happen, but you don't know what's going to happen while you get there. And neither do the characters that they have written for this game. You'll run into people who talk about what they're going to do when they get to New York or when they get back to Philadelphia, in the case of Max Seidelman, one of my favorite characters in the game. Just some slick salesman, slick shooter kind of guy. Love that dude. He's fantastic. You run into the butler, who teaches you throughout the game. It's the first person you meet when you get into your cabin. But then also you can try and go into the first class lounge, and he says, this time of night, it's not open. It will only be open in an emergency, which we are not experiencing at the current moment. And you're just like, okay, I know where this is going. There's little seeds like that strewn throughout the entire game. And you're just like, well, I know we're going to get there eventually, but these people have no idea. And it's great that they're written this way. It really gives you a sense of immersion into that particular time period at that particular time. Granted, the political espionage mission that you're going on is a bit far-fetched, but being able to explore the actual Titanic under this guise of the mission, while also hearing from people who think that they're just going to go live their normal lives when they get off the ship. It really is an interesting way to tell this story. There are multiple characters even outside of the original story. The Lord and Lady Lambeth are very interesting. You have some sort of connection to Georgia, Lady Georgia Lambeth. In fact, you visiting her was the reason you failed the mission the first time. And then when you go back, you meet your contact first, and then you meet with her to sort of change history. And there's a whole familial thing going on there. That tangentially connects to the main story through a different character named Sasha Barbican, who runs a gallery. I'm trying to be as vague as possible here because I don't want to give away any of the story beats. I want you to play it for yourself. You can still get it on Steam. You can get it on Good Old Games. I will warn you that it's an older game, so it takes a little finagling to get running. But if you can do so, I highly recommend it because it is, I'm going to spend 15 to 20 minutes talking about it. So I certainly think it's worth it. And I think that you would too. The way as the story continues, you have this pocket watch, and it tells you what time it is as you're going through. And you would think that means that you have to complete the entire mission within a certain amount of time. That's not true. So you have, there are certain points in the story where after you complete a conversation or after you do an action, you'll see a brief cutscene of the Titanic on the water. Right. That is to let you know that you've reached a checkpoint. The time has now passed. And after a certain point, the one that you're going to see is you running into the iceberg. From the moment the iceberg is hit, there's a little scene that plays out in a certain way. Again, I'm being vague here. And you eventually end up back in your cabin. From the moment you end up back in your cabin after the iceberg is hit, you then have an actual time limit to do everything you want to do, or else you're stuck. You have, I think I've read it's 55 minutes in real time from the cabin to the end to get through the last little pieces of the puzzle and make sure you have all the items that you need for the best ending and do everything that you want to do before it's time to go. Right. And as you're going through that 55 minutes, again, cutscenes will play, but instead of the ship, just sailing on the water and going along its merry way, it's sinking more and more. And then you'll try to go to one part of the ship, but it's underwater and you can't get there anymore. And you'll see people, going onto the lifeboats and the crew trying to tell people what to do. It's just, it becomes a frenzy, a mad dash to get through every single thing you need to do before the end of the game. And then you can get off the ship and get your ending there, or you can fail. You can remain on the ship. And from the entire 55 minutes beforehand, you have this increasingly tense music that's playing, and it's getting more and more urgent as time passes, and you're getting all these things done. But then if you miss the last lifeboat and you're stuck on the ship, there's no more music. It's just quiet. And you have a couple of minutes to talk to the people that you've been talking to the entire time throughout this game who were doomed. And I feel like everybody who plays this game should do this at least once, then reload a save, just to feel that sense of dread and impending, the impending destruction. One of the characters, Daisy Cashmore, this is the only one that I'll spoil. You meet her in the grand staircase, and she's a busybody. She's a gossip. She just wants to hang out with the rich people and be rich and and all this other stuff. And the one thing she asks you to do is go to the purser, the guy who, you'll be dealing with, who holds items, and he asks you to find a cufflink for Isidore Strauss and other things that push the mission ahead. She wants to know the name of a guy who was making eyes at her at dinner or something. And all she has is his initials, and you go ask the purser and you go back to her. And then you'll see her other times, and she'll give you guides on where to go and all this other stuff. And she's a total socialite, only wants the best, only wants, to hang out with the richest people, so on and so forth. Well, at the end, after the icebergs hit, you can run into her on the deck, and she's being choosy about which lifeboat she wants to get in. She's only going to get in with the best people, or she's only going to get in a lifeboat with the people with names or statuses. At one point, she's like, this person brought on her purse or her handbag. Why can't I bring a steamer trunk? So she doesn't want to leave her stuff. And then if you stay on the Titanic after the last boat goes, she's one of the people left behind. And she's just wandering, mumbling to herself, realizing what she's done. It's one of the most tragic things in the entire game. Couldn't be more tragic, which is a hint. If you do end up playing it, that'll make sense. I find her writing to be fascinating. There's another character, Leland Trask. He is a medium, a psychic, and he acts as your what do I do failsafe. So if you are stuck and you have items in your inventory, you can go to him, have him do a quote reading, and he'll say, this is a thing. Here's what you might have to do. And then you go and you do that. I like him as well. He, at the end, they use him as a sort of I know that you knew about this the whole time. I know they basically play on the fact that you, the player, know what was going to happen at the end because you live in the current age. And he's like, you had a second chance to go back and fix this, knowing what was going to happen. Don't screw it up now. He doesn't say that in any certain terms, but he basically knew that you knew. And he kind of throws that at you at the end. And you're just like, oh, okay. You were in on this the whole time. It's a wonderful story. I think it's a very interesting, intriguing story with a couple of mini games and puzzles mixed into the pointing and clicking. There's where in order to get information from one guy, you have to fence him, and it's just clicking around and making sure you don't get hit by the foil. There's another part where you get into a fist fight, and it's the greatest fist fight in the history of video games, just because it's your floating hands and the guy who's acting just kind of throwing air punches and pretending to be hit, and it makes me laugh every single time. It shouldn't, but it's just very silly how it plays out, but it adds to the, how endearing this game is. It adds to the overall feeling of how much fun I'm having playing this PC point and click adventure. And then, like I said, there are 8 different endings based on how many important items that you've gained throughout your adventure. Did you get the Rubaiyat? Did you get a painting that becomes plot relevant? Did you get a notebook that becomes plot relevant? Did you get off the ship? Did the items go down with the ships? Things like that. There's something with a necklace that belongs to Georgia. That's part of it too. And then you get 8 different endings. The best ending sees you prevent World War I because the notebook contains a name of Russian revolutionaries that you then hand over to the Russian Secret Service, the Okhrana. And then, so Lenin, Trotsky, they don't get to do what they wanted to do, let's say. And then the painting had plans on it, like military plans that the Germans were going to use against the Allies, and then they can't use that anymore. And then it talks about what happened to the painter of said painting. And if you know anything about that history, and a particular person who was a painter at the time before they had, let's say, a historically significant career change, that person gets mentioned too in passing. So it creates this alternate universe where neither war happened and everybody's happy and peace will reign and all that good stuff, even though, and the Titanic was like the linchpin for it. And then there are 7 other endings where, you know, some of them you end up shot dead, some of them you go down with the ship. It's all very fascinating. And it lends itself to about a 3-hour adventure if you're really going through every part of the ship and trying to do every side story. I cannot recommend this game enough. I really can't. It is a fascinating look, a fascinating piece of historical fiction, and a time capsule of what PC point-and-click adventures used to be able to do through CyberFlix. The look of the game, the music of the game, which I played a little bit at the beginning, but I didn't really get into. The soundtrack is phenomenal. And some of that I say sarcastically, like when you get to D-Deck for the first time and you hear the song that plays, you're going to be like, Jason, I listened to this podcast. How can you say this is the best song, the best soundtrack of all time? Listen. Like, that's it. When you get to D-Deck, it's just this. And then eventually, 25, 30 seconds in, it starts to shift and get a little more creepy, right? But for the first, we're on 23 seconds here. There, see, finally shifts. And for 23 seconds, and it gets a little more melodic and interesting. But now the entire soundtrack is not that repetitive, but it's all that level of eerie and creepy and interesting and very, very well done. The composer, Eric Holt, did a fantastic job creating the sense of dread through his music, even with some of the more melodic and beautiful pieces. Like the one I played at the beginning of this talk was from C Deck. It's one of the first songs you'll hear because your cabin is on C Deck. So as soon as the tutorial butler Smethels leaves, you stop that conversation, bang, that song hits, and you're on your way. You'll be doing cryptography. You'll be sending messages out through the wireless, through the Morse code. You'll be developing pictures in a dark room. You'll be talking about, a baby and how it's being used as ransom. It is a very interesting adventure with a lot of very interesting characters, and one that if you have even a slight interest in the Titanic that doesn't involve the 1997 movie with James Cameron or a submersible that could end up poorly for you, this is a great way to scratch that itch. Play through this game, live on the Titanic through this point-and-click adventure for a little while. Or, like I said, if you're not doing the adventure, there's also the tour mode where you can just tour the ship, which is very, very cool. And get yourself a piece of mid to late 90s PC gaming through Titanic Adventure Out of Time, which, again, can be found on Steam, GOG, and other places across the internet, even now. But, again, fair warning, if you want to get it running on a modern computer, it will take some tinkering. It's a 30-year-old game almost, but it's worth it. I guarantee you it is worth it. So, my name is Jason Fanelli. Thank you for listening to this episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I hope you go out and try to explore this historical game. I definitely say it's worth it. You can find me at Big Man Fanelli on socials or TCG Joe on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter if you want to do some card game sort of stuff. I'm opening packs and, deck techs and stuff like that. But above all, no matter what you do, if you follow me, if you don't, or whatever you're doing, may I wish you happy gaming.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
What's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.